Good morning, Robin and Maxime. It's great to see you and have this time. And Robin, just so thankful that you were able to come and be part of this. And we're very interested in your work with Bridges of Canada and specifically what you do in the Ottawa area. Could you tell Maxime and me a little about what you do?
Sure. So I work with anybody in a federal institution anywhere in Canada who's planning to reintegrate into the Ottawa area and who would like support and connection through community groups or restorative processes.
Mm.
So there's a couple parts to that. So basically, I work with the people who are incarcerated, trying to understand when they've experienced the most positive connections in their life. So what makes them feel most connected, most alive, most themselves, what matters most, and also what are their specific needs or fears in relation to the upcoming transition. So we're looking for ways that we can make that change more easeful for them. And then there's another part which involves engaging the community in Ottawa with the work of supporting those in transition. And I will say, even though it's called the Faith Community Reintegration Program, which is a very long name, our philosophy to that work is such that we understand the needs of, like the physical needs of shelter and food and clothing, as well as emotional connection, has spiritual needs. So it's a fairly broad interpretation.
And are you alone in doing this? Or do you have a team working with you? Do you have volunteers?
Yeah, so I am one part-time staff. I work 2 days a week, and then I have a team of about 20 volunteers who support me in this work. And then as well as the community partners who play all different kinds of roles. Yeah, so ideally, the part that's different for my role than the volunteers is ideally I start meeting with people while they're in the institutions. I find that the transition processes are gentler when that can happen. And then the volunteers come into play once people are in the community, and we can continue working with people until they hit warrant expiry. And the benefit of having volunteers is if people still require support after that warrant expiry date, that's when the parole is completed, then they still have that continuity at that point as well through the volunteers.
I have a suspicion your car knows the route to Kingston. Do you do a lot of trips to Kingston to interview potential clients?
Yeah, so pre-pandemic, that would be a regular trip. I'd visit all the prisons with people that had people who were planning to reintegrate to Ottawa and wanted support. So Kingston as far as way as Bath, Millhaven. But that's really stopped since the pandemic. I haven't been inside an institution since the pandemic, unfortunately, but whenever possible, primarily the chaplains and sometimes correction officers facilitate phone meetings for us. And so that's the way that it happens now.
Okay. Maxime, do you have any questions for Robin?
The thing that would be really interested in is if you have any statistics regarding recidivism rates when it comes to when an individual chooses your program rather than, going on their own.
So I only have my personal statistics, so that's unfortunately not recorded, but I can tell you that I've been in this position approximately 3.5 years. I support approximately 25 people a year, and the recidivism rate over the course of those 3.5 years has been 4%. And that's relative to, I think it's between 28 to 32% for a national average. But I feel it's important to give you a context for that number. So 4% of that total number of people who have participated in the program amounts to one person.
Okay.
That one person I met with one time for basically an intake meeting. That person, I'll change a few of the statistics to maintain confidentiality, but I met with him when he was in his 60s. He had already been in Ottawa for some time, but had basically resided in institutions since he was a child. So was dropped off at an orphanage at the age of 5. From the orphanage, went into foster care to youth detention to provincial jail, and obviously our paths crossed when he was in a federal institution. So between the time I met him first and when we were to meet again, he reoffended, was resentenced. However, once inside, he needed the support again of someone in community, and I happened to be the person he reached out to. And that was about 3 years ago. And since that time, we've been in touch once a month by phone. And he is planning to reapply to Ottawa when he gets to his statutory release. And we're already planning for the kinds of community supports he might have at that time. So there's a lot more I could say about that, but just to give some context for the statistic. And when I started the position, I reached out to other people who had this role across the country, and their rates were very similar.
Yeah, thanks for answering that to the best of your ability. I know it's hard sometimes to bring like real statistics, right? Because it's not necessarily something you count or have a huge sample size of. But I just feel like people really respond when they hear numbers like that, and it's a crazy change. What is that? 10 times less likely to reoffend. So that's amazing, obviously. Could you also address the importance of being faith-based organization?
Yeah, so again, for me, that's really, really broad. So it's any positive connection, whatever that looks like. And I'm really open with what that looks like. So as much as possible, not needing or trying to put anybody in a box. So just trying to understand and really listen for what has been most important and positive to that person. So for example, a lot of people say that a surprising amount say that their most positive connection has been when they're spending time in nature. And so what does that mean for me in terms of supporting that connection or maintaining and building on that connection when they arrive in Ottawa, an urban city? So one of the ways that's played out is building a partnership with Forest Therapy Ottawa, who provides guided forest therapy walks within city green spaces. So people who participate in FCRP are able to participate in that program at no cost. So I had one person I can think of, and we started meeting when he was inside. He served over 20 years. And within a week of being released into Ottawa, knowing that that had been a positive connection for him, the most positive memory he could think of was on one of his day paroles, he had been able to paddle a canoe. And that was one of his most joyful experiences in the 20 years. And within a week of his being released, he was able to go to a local green space and join a group of people who shared a similar connection with the natural world and be guided into relating more deeply with the trees and with these people and other beings who are in the forest. And yeah, he just looked at me at one point. I accompanied him on the walk, and he said, "This is what I love." And you can just imagine how fortifying that would be for someone who's learning to use a cell phone for the first time in the latter part of his life, to ride a bus for the first time, to learn the city, to get up at 4:30 a.m. and ride on a bus for an hour and a half to a very physically demanding job at that age. So this was something that helped sustain him through the other challenges that he inevitably faced. Mhm.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Robin. That's wonderful to hear these stories and what you do. It's very eye-opening, and we appreciate your giving us insight into what you do.
Yeah, I think the stories sometimes bring it to life more than just kind of describing it. So that's why I take that route.
Excellent. Thank you.
I always find it interesting when we're talking to another organization. They bring up something that's should be so obvious, but you just overlook so much. Like I would have never have thought about nature in the forest, but it makes so much sense that someone who's been, surrounded by cement for the last 20 years would want to be in nature and experience all of its beauty, right? So it's really cool. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Another one of the most common kind of along the same lines requests that I get is when I ask people that question, when have they felt most connected? Some people describe that they've never experienced that with another human being, that they've experienced with an animal. So we have a group of people right now, a network who's working to look at how can we increase animal support during reintegration. It's surprisingly hard, especially during a pandemic, but we're beginning to create opportunities for people to experience this.
That's brilliant. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that.